Hello, welcome to chapter 2. Okay, so let's go into week 1, chapter 2, PowerPoints, and open them up. And title of chapter 2 is The History of Management. Okay, so in this chapter we'll learn the origins of management, the history of scientific management, history of bureaucratic and administrative management, history of human relations management, and discuss the history of operations information systems and contingency management. Okay, so management ideas and practices from the Sumerians and the Egyptians, 5000 BC, 4000 BCE to 2000 BCE, and then it goes down to throughout the history of all the different great societies and the management and where they were as far as planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Remember that from chapter 1. Okay, and then we'll come down here to managers today. Managers are needed to organize large groups, work with employees, and make decisions, hopefully good decisions. Okay, Frederick Taylor is the father of scientific management. Scientific management is a thorough study and testing of different work methods to identify most efficient ways to complete a job. Develop time study to determine what could be considered a fair day's work. Time study is timing how long it takes good workers to complete each part of their job. For example, he studied masonry and retooled how masons lay brick. And the technique that he created, the order, the way things are done, how to hold the different tools and the brick and how to put on the mortar and all that, his technique is still being used today because it was not only effective, but it was efficient and it was the fastest way that's effective to lay brick. He also studied how to shovel coal into the furnaces for the steel mills. He studied all the different size shovels, the different weights, how long people should work before they have a break. And so he came up with the best, most effective and efficient way of shoveling coal into the furnaces to keep the furnaces as hot as they needed to be to create steel. And it came out to be a medium-sized shovel, 2 men working. Of course, back then it was just men. And it was 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. After 15 minutes, you were so exhausted that your productivity just went down too far. So you took a 15-minute break while the other person shoveled for 15 minutes. And then you went back and forth like that until the shift was done. So after many different types of experiments, that's what he came up with. And that's the scientific method of management, figuring out the most efficient ways of doing it. So first you develop a science for each element, select the train, teach, and develop that, and then cooperate with the men so that they ensure all work is being done in accordance with the principles that the scientific method created. And then equal division of work, so responsibility between management and workmen, so that everything gets done effectively as well as efficiently. And then the next two people that came along with scientific methods were Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. If you ever watched the movie Cheaper by the Dozen, the original one from back in the 1950s, that movie was based on Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. And they did many motion time studies. One of the most famous ones was they actually filmed their children getting their tonsils out and try to create a more efficient and effective way for surgeons to take tonsils out because all the children had their tonsils out at the same time, including Frank. Henry Gantt developed the Gantt chart, indicates which tasks must be done first and completed in order to complete the entire project. Okay, So you had to have everything done in the proper order, and if it wasn't, then you couldn't actually finish the project. And that created ordering all the supplies and materials so that they would come in on time, so that each job got done in order, so that you could finish the project. Max Weber, the W is pronounced with it as a B. He created bureaucracy to exercise control the basis of knowledge, expertise, and experience to achieve organization's goals in the most effective ways possible. 7 elements characterized by bureaucracies. And basically, the most efficient way of thinking of this is that he created every person to have only one supervisor, so that you only take instruction from one person, so that two different people aren't telling you to do two different things, and you can't do them obviously at the same time, and that creates confusion. Elements that characterize bureaucracies: chain of command, so there's your organizational chart, everyone reports to one person. Recorded in writing, merit-based promotions, division of labor. So when people say it's not my job, that's the right thing to say, because you're dividing labor properly. And it's, if you're hired to be um, a surgeon, it's not your job to take out the trash. And that's not the right division of labor. So when they say other tasks as assigned, it still has to be within the realm of the position and not beyond that, to follow Max Weber's model. Then you have Henri Fayol, division of work, discipline, unity of command, centralization, the scalar chain, all these different ways to make sure that everything got done correctly, efficiently, and effectively. And they kept on growing with it so that there was more order and less chaos. Excuse me. Human relations management came next, and that focused more on people, treating people as people, not as cogs in the wheel. The other ones were basically treating people as though they were just machines. And the human relations management began saying that there needs to be conflict resolution. You need to be compromising. You need to feel, uh, take into consideration people's feelings and not just what they're looking at. Mary Parker Follett was back in the 19 teens and 20s, and she was actually a social worker, and she actually created modern day organizational behavior, even though she doesn't get much credit for it. Because when she started, women couldn't vote, and so many of her books were copied and updated, including today's textbooks. Much of what the concepts are for organizational behavior today came from Mary Parker Follett. And then Elton Mayo's Hawthorne study. This was the effects of treating people special. Elton Mayo went into the factory with his um, graduate assistants and studied the different effects of the elements, the lighting, the heat, all the different ways that people stood. Basically, try to do a scientific method on this one section of the plant of General Electric, and found out that every time they did whatever they did, productivity increased. And then they finally realized that it increased because the factory workers felt special, that they were treating them differently than the other factory workers. They were asking them questions, and they were listening to them, and they were writing down what they were saying, and actually wanted to incorporate that into the study. And so they felt special, and so they just increased productivity. Even if it was a candlelight type lighting, they still increased productivity when Elton Mayo and his crew were there, just because of the way they were treated, which started a whole new area that incorporated Mary Parker Follett's theories. Chester Bernard defined organization, and then quantitative methods to find ways to increase productivity, improve quality, and manage or reduce costly inventory. Just in time inventory and all that type of thing came from out of that. And human relations management. Oh, I'm sorry, we come down here. That's the one I wanted. And then Eli Whitney, who's a private gun contractor, introduced the concept of manufacturing using standardized interchangeable parts. Um, and then Gaspro Monod explained techniques of drawing three-dimensional objects that help in making standardized interchangeable parts without first examining a prototype. So he basically made a blueprint. That's what they're describing there. And then Oldsmobile Motor Works Detroit invented hand-to-mouth inventory systems, which was the precursor to just-in-time inventory system, where you just get the inventory right before you need it to create the product. Okay. Um, a system is a set of interrelated elements or parts that function as a whole. Subsystem is a smaller part of the system. It helps create synergy. A closed system sustains themselves without interaction with the environment. An open system sustains themselves only with interaction with the environment. Okay. And here's a little model that shows the two. And then you have your contingency management, which holds that there is no universal management theory, that everything depends on the circumstance. Practical implication is that management cannot quickly solve a company's problems by taking a few steps, but managers must pay attention to key contingencies, different situations, and problems. Obviously, contingency management is what we needed this year so far with the coronavirus and how to adapt and survive in your business with that. Obviously, that's contingency management. Nothing could have prepared you for that, and most companies didn't have a plan to cope with that. And that's the end of chapter 2.